The bells of King's Landing tolled vespers, throwing molten echoes across the courtyards of the Red Keep. Yet Robert Baratheon ignored them as a man might ignore the buzzing of a gnat. He stood at the Tower of the Hand's open balcony, a coarse wind tugging at his beard, eyes fixed eastward across a sky bruised purple by sunset. He imagined, though his gaze could never reach so far, the smoking deserts of the Red Waste and a broken palace where a barefoot Targaryen girl walked among embers with 3 fresh-hatched dragons huddled at her heels. Behind him, the chamber reeked of parchment, candle grease, and council sweat. The small council had spoken their fill, warnings, doubts, muttered prayers, and, to Robert's disgust, half-hearted apologies to a dead line that refused to stay dead. He had heard enough. "Your Grace," Grand Maester Pycelle wheezed now, daring a tiny step forward. "Dragons are not as they were in Aegon's day, if these hatchlings are real. And the gods know rumor blossoms faster than crabgrass in spring. Then years will pass before they grow large enough to threaten the realm." Robert turned, thick fingers drumming the pommel of the war hammer hanging at his side. "Years? How many years before a beast that breathes fire is too great a threat, Maester? 1, 2? I have a lad in the belly of the Blackwater who saw his brother burned alive by a lantern's spill. That was no dragon. Yet the boy's brother is ash all the same." Littlefinger smirked from the shadows near a shuttered window, rolling a silver stag across his knuckles. "Surely we can purchase peace cheaper than war. A pouch of gold, a few highborn hostages exchanged, a marriage alliance. King Robert weds the dragon queen herself." The coin clinked, and Robert stalked forward, batting it from Peter's hand. It rattled against stone. "I'd sooner bed a corpse than a Targaryen. I remember the trident, Baelish. Do you?" Peter's smile slipped, but only for a breath. "Memories fade, debts endure." "They do," Robert growled. "And mine is still unpaid." He swept an arm, knocking aside a sheaf of reports Varys had placed carefully upon the map table. Burnt villages in the disputed lands, caravans swallowed by fire beyond Karth, sailors sworn dead by air that glowed in the night. Proof enough. Dragons live, no matter which piss-poor maester doubts it. Ned Stark alone held Robert's eyes without flinching. "Brother," he said softly, "if you lead an army across the narrow sea, the realm will bleed behind you. Stannis and Renly would quarrel over the crown ere your ship passes Dragonstone. And should you fall, Joff? Enough." Robert's voice cracked like oak in a hearth. "I will not sit fat on that iron chair while Targaryen fire rekindles abroad. We slew Rhaegar to end that madness. I will end it again." He rounded on Varys, silken robes whispering. "Spider, how far is the girl from Pentos?" Varys folded pudgy hands, eyes shining. "Farther each day, your grace. From the Free City to the Red Waste, then on to the ancient ruins of Vis Teloro. But dragons grow quickly when fed, and the girl has no shortage of zealots to feed them." Robert grunted. "Send ravens to Lords Ironwood and Tarth, to every sell-sail captain worth his salt from Mere to Lys. I want ships, swift and shallow-drafted, that can nose through pirate shallows and strike like a boar spear. 10,000 seasoned men. And the smiths, gods old and new, send word to Tobo Mott." "A dragon can melt steel," Pycelle muttered. "Then ours must be the harder." 2 moons later, the windship Stag's Fury sliced the sunrise off the Stormland's coast, her sails painted black to hide from Dornish lookouts lest whispers of the voyage seep home. Robert stood at the prow beside Ser Barristan Selmy, the Lord Commander's white cloak billowing behind him. Below deck clanged chains of new-forged ballistae, ironwood arms wound with sinew, corals tipped in wildfire glass. Robert breathed deep the salt. For the first time in a decade, wine did not weigh in his gut, and the ache in his leg from the boar's tusk seemed little more than a bruise. The hunt was on. Behind them, half a fleet followed. 12 cogs laden with grain and horseflesh, 5 longships bristling with Stormlander archers, and the pride of Paxter Redwine, loaned at exorbitant cost and captained by Redwine's own cousin. Above the masts snapped banners, the crowned stag of Baratheon, the white kraken of Selmy's ancestral isle, and a new sigil painted at Robert's command. a golden hammer crossing a silver spear tipped with a flame. Barristan studied it, blue eyes grave. A noble emblem, your grace. Yet note the stories. Aegon the Conqueror lost half his host to desert heat before Meraxes and Vhagar ever took wing. Essos is a harsh mistress. Robert spat into the sea. Harsh or soft, she'll yield. And should these dragons prove small as chickens, I'll mount their heads on pikes and send one to every lord in Westeros so none forget. He glanced aft, where Ser Jaime Lannister lounged against the rail, golden hair bright as coin. Jaime caught the king's gaze and tipped 2 fingers in salute. He had demanded his place on the voyage, and Robert, mindful of Cersei's rage and Joffrey's fragile legitimacy, had granted it. Better a lion you can watch than one sneaking in tall grass. Do you trust him? Barristan asked, following the glance. Robert snorted. No more than I trust vipers not to bite. But the Kingsguard vows are stone, and Jaime swings a sword better than any 3 men. For weeks later the fleet crept into the wine-dark harbor of Pentos under cover of night. The Magisters received them with soft smiles and softer threats. The Dothraki hordes had raised the fields north of the city. They said, caravans vanished. Farmers spoke of shadows that shrieked above. In the plazas, dragon cultists burned purple incense, praising the mother of dragons, breaker of chains. Words Robert found as distasteful as bile. In a pillared hall thin as a spider's leg, Illyrio Mopatus waddled forward, rings flashing. King Robert, how honored we are. He bowed so low his silk sleeves puddled like ink. Spare me, Robert growled. Where is she? Illyrio's little eyes glittered. The Khaleesi has slipped our nets. She rides with her Khalasar along the Skahazadan, heading south to the shadowed lands where no foeman dares follow. Ned Stark, gaunt from weeks of restless pitching seas, spoke up. Then we follow. A chase across half a world, Jaime mused, sounding too pleased. Dragons ahead, Dothraki behind, sand in our teeth. This will be a song for the ages. Robert slammed his goblet onto a pedestal, crimson wine spraying. It will be done. I have not marched so far to barter. He jabbed a finger at Illyrio. Provision my host, whatever gold you desire. The Magister bowed deeper still. There are costs beyond coin, O mighty king. When fires dance in the sky, men pray, markets close, mothers hide children in cellars. Dragons unchain more than flame. They unchain faith. Robert bristled. Then we'll chain it back. The Stormlanders marched east across the Roine River in a line that stretched from reed-choked banks to Dusty Ridge. Scouts returned daily with stories of villages abandoned, livestock half-eaten, doors melted like tallow. One night, a column of flame lit the horizon and ash drifted soft as morning snow, coating every tent. Men awoke choking, hands smudged black. In the command pavilion, Robert studied a crude map of the red waste scratched in charcoal. She's driving west, he muttered to Ser Barristan. Toward Karth, if the tales hold true. A wise move, Barristan said. Its walls are high, its coffers deep, and its merchants hungry for marvels. A city of liars and spices, Ned Stark added. If Daenerys Targaryen secures Karth's protection, siege could cost us years. Robert's knuckles whitened on the map. Then we intercept. He jerked chin at Lord Renly, newly arrived with Tyrell knights resplendent in emerald cloaks. Your reach men will ride at dawn, cut across this salt flat. Renly eyed the symbol for an arid basin scratched between 2 ragged peaks. No water. My men will blister. Your men will do as their king commands. Outside, thunder rumbled though no storm brewed. The tent flaps snapped. Candles gutted. Barristan moved to the entrance, peered out, then stiffened. From the pillar of shadow on the horizon rose an orange glow, swirling like a tempest. Towers of flame burst skyward, 1, 2, 3, each higher than the last, as though some colossal smith hammered sparks off an anvil the size of a mountain. A hush fell over the camp. Horses screamed. Men fumbled for weapons they could not wield against the sky. Robert stepped beside Barristan, and for a heartbeat the fire's reflection gleamed red in the king's dark eyes. "By the 7," he breathed. "They are growing." On the 12th night of the march, the host reached the edge of a salt pan so wide the moon itself seemed trapped within it. Renly led the van. His banners fluttered listless in breathless heat. Even the wind had abandoned the land. Ahead, a rough stubble of dunes shimmered, and beyond them, movement. Renly lowered his hand. The column halted. Dust ghosts drifted between ranks as riders cantered forward, scouts returning. The lead scout slid from the saddle and knelt. "My lord," Dothraki outriders on the far ridge. Half a league. Robert pushed his horse up beside Renly's, dark cloak slapping. "Numbers. Hard to gauge. They sit their horses and watch." Robert ground molars. "Then we ride them down." Ned Stark reached for the reins of Robert's destrier. "The Dothraki fight in strange ways, Robert. They taunt, feint, take eyes, cut hamstrings, stag or wolf, it matters not. We are not in the king's wood." "Every land is my wood," Robert said, but released the reins. He stared across the glare where heat rippled. A shrill cry pierced the sky, not horse nor hawk. Men covered ears, horses skittered sideways. Down through the white blaze swooped a shadow, smaller than the tails, yet monstrous to eyes unprepared. Its wings beat like vast shutters, throwing eddies of wind that stank of sulfur. Scales glinted a deep onyx. The dragon skimmed the pan, claws dragging wake. Steam hissed where brine met heat. Bows twanged at random, arrows skipping wide. The dragon banked effortlessly, climbing above the army before belching a stream of greenish flame. It passed overhead, and torches, banners, even hair on startled scalps burst alight. Men fell screaming into the salty muck where fire hissed out, leaving rings of sizzling mud. Renly shouted orders that cracked in the sudden chaos. Ser Loras Tyrell wrenched off his cloak, beat at a flaming squire. Robert watched, transfixed by the creature's raw grace and power. This was no chicken. Its wingspan might fill the throne room, and still it grew. He felt the old thrill he had forgotten since the trident, the pure animal joy of a worthy foe. He roared wordless challenge, brandishing his hammer at the sky. The dragon circled once more, mindless, glorious, then soared back toward the distant dunes, where a second silhouette rose to meet it, smaller, copper-scaled, screaming for prey. That night Robert summoned his captains. The air tasted of burned leather and fear. 40 men lay dead, scorched or trampled. Twice as many bore wounds that festered already under green sticky ointment. "The beasts fly at will," Jaime observed, flexing a new blister on his palm. "By day we march like beetles under their gaze. By night we sleep beneath flame." Robert's eyes swept the dim faces. "Then we fight under cover. We march at night, rest by day beneath oiled canvas and pit-trench shields. We dig pits, rig nets, coat ballista corals with wildfire. I will have dragon blood on my hammer before the next moon wanes." Lord Renly leaned over the map. "Our supply lines grow thin. The further east we press, the longer ships must travel. Karth sits beyond our grasp." "Then we make Karth come to us," Robert said. "Spies speak of 13 merchant princes ruling by fear and spectacle. They would pay a kingdom's weight for a dragon skull. We capture one alive." Even Jaime laughed at that. "Perhaps we'll teach it tricks. Fetch and heal and breathe fire when commanded." Robert did not smile. "We build a cage of iron and wildfire glass. A beast cannot burn what wounds it." Ned met Robert's gaze. "You mean to bring a monster home? What then?" "I will show the realm that dragons bleed like men," Robert said. "Their myth ends at storm's end, nailed upon my gate." Weeks rolled into months. The king's host threaded ravines where the sun baked rock to slag. Men collapsed beneath mailed hauberks that flashed like mirrors. At night the dragons circled beyond torchlight, eyes glowing embers, yet rarely struck. Scouts reported they herded game into narrow gullies and burned them, feasting on charred carcass. Robert paced each sunrise, cursing the beast's cunning. "They toy with us," he muttered to Barristan, like a stag bleeding a boar before the kill. Yet they pressed on. One dawn, the lead column topped a plateau to a sight that stole breath. An ancient city of jade stone half swallowed by sand, towers tilting, walls cracked, but intact. Within the crumbling gates sprawled the tents of a khalasar, thousands of mottled horses, cook fires curling blue smoke. From the city's shattered ziggurat a flag rose, bearing a red sunburst over black. Beneath it stood Daenerys Targaryen, silver gold hair rippling, a babe on her hip swaddled in pale cloth, and a dragon perched upon each shoulder, one black, one green. A third larger beast sprawled at her feet, wings draped like a cape. Robert's breath hissed between teeth. So the little queen shows herself. Ned's voice was hoarse. She dares parley. She dares nothing. She invites judgment. Trumpets announced the king's approach. Robert rode ahead with Ser Barristan, Ned, and 5 chosen knights, banners furled. Opposite them Daenerys advanced on foot, only Ser Jorah Mormont at her side, ragged cloak dragging. The black dragon, larger now than any war horse, paced behind her, eyes slits of molten gold. She bowed neither head nor knee. King Robert, her voice carried, cool as oasis water. You hunt what is mine. Robert's gauntlet creaked upon his reins. Even here, meters apart, the dragon's heat licked his cheeks. Girl, you hold stolen fire. Return to the shadow you came from, or burn. She smiled faintly. Stolen? Fire belongs to none. It is the breath of the world. Dragons return because the world remembers. Robert hefted the hammer across his saddle. The world will forget again. I will see to it. Mormont stepped forward, hand on sword. Your grace, he addressed Robert. The Khaleesi seeks only passage and peace. Barristan broke in, eyes locked on Jorah. You stand against your king, Mormont? Jorah's jaw clenched. I stand with the mother of dragons. Daenerys raised a hand. He stilled. She regarded Robert. Once you loved a Targaryen. Lyanna Stark was stolen, you said. Yet here you are, prepared to steal life from the last of her blood. Robert's gaze flicked to Ned. Stark's eyes were stone. Memory stabbed deeper than any blade. Lyanna is dust, Robert grated. And you are not her blood.
No.
But I am life that came from fire. I will not be dust. She extended one slim arm. The black dragon crawled across the broken step, scales rasping. Heat gusted. Robert's mount reared, foam flecking. Ser Barristan seized reins. Smoke curled from the dragon's nostrils. Its tongue flickered crimson. Robert bared teeth. So be it. He wheeled his horse. Prepare the siege engines. Daenerys watched him depart, the babe silent against her breast. Wind rattled banners, carrying a faint scent of ash and milk. That evening, under a sky of hard stars, Robert's captains hammered stakes for ballistae. Wildfire jars were strapped beneath coral heads. Archers soaked arrows in pitch. The men worked quietly, like priests at a grave. The dragons circled far above, 3 shadows swirling amid constellations. Ned found Robert standing alone on a dune crest, gazing at the ruined city where torchlight shimmered on jade. You mean to storm at dawn? Robert did not turn. If she yields the dragons, the rest may live. She will not yield. Robert's fist closed. Then she dies.
Ned stepped closer.
Robert, listen. Once you spared children, for my sake, for honor. These dragons are children still, in their way. Robert laughed, brittle. Children? They burned 40 of my men alive before they could scream a prayer. Ned's throat worked. Would Lyanna want this? Would she have you butcher a mother and her babes? Robert faced him at last, eyes glistening with reflected starlight. Lyanna wanted peace. Rhaegar's madness stole it. Dragons are madness given wing. If I must carve peace from flame, I will. Ned stood silent as the wind sighed between them. At length he said, Then may the gods judge. Dawn cracked bleeding red. Trumpets blared. The Stormlander host advanced in a crescent, shields interlocked. From the ruined walls, horns tottered as Dothraki riders poured forth, scimitars flashing. Above, dragons screamed. Siege engines boomed. The first ballista bolt streaked green with wildfire, trailing sparks. It struck the copper dragon mid-arc. The bolt snapped, leaving a shard embedded between scales. The beast shrieked, tumbling. Flame burst from its maw uncontrolled, a spray of half-formed fire that crashed onto milling riders below. Men died in green infernos. The smell of cooked flesh swept the field. Robert surged forward on horseback, hammer raised, roaring for Lannister and Tyrell and Baratheon alike. Walls crumbled beneath dragon flame. Chunks of jade fell like rotten teeth. Dothraki arrows hissed. Jaime Lannister laughed as he carved a path, golden armor ablaze with reflected fire. Renly's green knights buckled but held, spears braced against charging screamers. Sudden shadow swallowed sunlight. The black dragon dove, wings beating thunder, mouth gaping molten. It loosed a torrent of flame so bright day became white. Ballista crews vanished. Wood shrieked, iron melted, men burst like candles. Robert threw up his shield. Heat blasted him to his knees. The shield warped, rim glowing cherry. When the light dimmed he rose, hair singed, lips cracked, but alive. The dragon wheeled, climbing for another pass. Robert bellowed. Archers loosed a volley. Arrows pattered uselessly off night-dark scales. One shaft, fletched in black and gold, found the soft membrane where wing met body. The dragon lurched, listing. It fought for air but lost height, scraping talons across rock, scattering sparks. Its momentum carried it past Robert, down into a dry canal bed. Thrashed, tail barbs gouging stone. Robert tore forward, heedless of burning debris. Around him, battle raged. Steel rang, horses screamed, but his world shrank to the colossal beast struggling before him. He vaulted a fallen wagon, reached the canal's lip. The dragon's head whipped round, eyes like twin solar furnaces. It inhaled. Robert hurled his hammer. The wrought steel head crashed into one glowing eye. Bone shattered, golden fire gouged sideways in a blast of agony. Even a dragon could know pain. It reared, half-blind, shrieking. Robert slid down the embankment, drawing his dagger. Valyrian steel, a gift from Ned long ago. He leapt, slashing. The blade bit between scales at the throat joint. Hot blood fountained, hissing on contact with cool morning air, painting Robert's face. The dragon's roar faltered, sagged, wings collapsing. He spewed but died to steam. Above the din, Robert heard human screams and the furious wail of the remaining green dragon. He yanked the dagger free, stumbled back. The black head lowered, one eye smoking ruin. Slowly, the monster stilled. Robert fell to his knees, chest heaving, hands caked black-red. He gazed at the corpse under the rising sun, victory coursing through his veins like sweet wine. Yet beneath the triumph, something hollow echoed, an emptiness that dwarfed the corpse. Daenerys felt her heart tear before the vision met her eyes. From the citadel's crumbling gallery, she saw smoke plume, heard the cry of her eldest, Viserion? No, Drogon, her dark darling, then silence. She clutched the baby tighter. The babe wailed. Ser Jorah seized her arm. You must fly, now. But her legs refused obey. Down in the canal she glimpsed a figure, ant-like against Drogon's fallen bulk. A man in dark mail, hammer glinting. The king, Robert Baratheon. Steel and blood made flesh. Tears blurred the dawn. She felt, rather than saw, regal coil at her back, wings shivering with grief. The green dragon hissed a question toward his dying brother. "Shoo!" she whispered to him, to herself, to the child. "We still live." Her tears scalded but did not fall. They turned to steam against the wind that now rose, whipping her silver-gold hair. She drew a breath deep as sorrow. "Jorah, ready the horses. We ride south. Khaleesi, we ride," she repeated, lower, harder. "And we return with more than fire." She turned back once. Robert Baratheon stood upon Drogon's neck, hammer raised in salute or threat. Around him banners lifted. The crowned stag, bloodied but unbroken. Daenerys' heart flared with rage bright as any flame. The hunt had killed a dragon, but hunts end, wars endure. She would endure, and on a distant day, the debts he claimed to settle would be rendered unto him 100-fold, in fire, in sorrow, in the ashes of kings. Night fell upon a battlefield littered with glassy slag and bones. The Stormlander host made camp amid ruins bright with emberglow. Maesters tended the wounded. Priests muttered thanks to the Seven. In his pavilion Robert sat alone before the severed head of Drogon. Jaws prized open, fangs like scythes. He drank deep from a wineskin gone tepid, watching candlelight flicker within the vacated sockets. A slow rustle, then Ned entered. He smelled of smoke and death. He gazed upon the trophy in silence. Robert spoke first, voice thick. "I swore to end the beast, and I have. Yet I feel lighter of an oath, heavier of soul." Ned sank onto a stool. Victory can weigh more than defeat. Robert drank again. The girl fled, but she will return, and her dragons will breed. If she lives. Robert's laugh was a broken shell of sound. She lives. Fire burns stubborn in Targaryen blood. I know. He stared into the dragon's vacant eye, where once his hammer had struck. This hunt is far from finished, old friend. Outside, winds shifted, carrying distant thunder not of storm but of wing beats. In the dark, somewhere beyond broken walls, the last two dragons mourned their kin with cries that would haunt men's dreams for generations. The king listened, shoulders bowed beneath a cloak of triumph that felt curiously like grief. The hunt had claimed its prize, yet forged a prophecy he could not name. And in the east, a silver-haired mother nursed wrath by the light of two pulsing hearts, plotting a reckoning that would test the marrow of the world. So the game began anew. Stag against dragon, crown against fire, and in the shadows of Essos the sky itself trembled, for the wing beats of vengeance had already begun to quicken. The ruins of Oris Calatus smoldered for 3 days, and on each of those days the sun seemed to hang lower and redder, as if ashamed to watch. Char and slag lay everywhere. Pools of melted jade that had once been proud walls, mounds of glass-smooth sand where stone towers had collapsed in incandescent cascades, rank heaps of burned horseflesh clogging the alleys. The company healers swabbed wounds that would never close and lanced blisters that puckered anew each dawn. The quartermasters sent grim riders scavenging for water that did not taste of ash. The Septons spoke soft homilies to dead men who had no ears left to hear. King Robert Baratheon stalked through it all like a wounded bull, half drunk on victory and half mad with a hunger nothing could sate. He ordered the carcass of the black dragon dissected where it fell. Whole companies of Tyrell engineers labored with winches, saws, and red-hot axes to peel scale from bone, hacking knee-deep in boiling ichor until even the bravest knights gagged on the humors that steamed up. When they finally wrested the skull free, vast as a ship's forecastle, jagged fangs glimmering green where wildfire had kissed them, Robert insisted it be hauled beneath his own banner, lashed to a wheeled sledge of oak armored in iron plates. Every mile the army marched thereafter, the monstrous trophy groaned across the salt flats like a prison cart dragging chains. Yet Robert's eyes drifted ever east, searching horizons already scorched bare. Nightly he walked the perimeter of camp alone, boots crunching over glassy sand, until the sentries whispered he had become a phantom himself. A hulking silhouette looming out of the heat haze with firelight dancing on mail, beard wild, hammer slung like judgment across his shoulder. And if, from some unseen fastness, 2 distant dragons screamed their grief to the sky, Robert only closed his fists around the haft and muttered that grief was for the weak. Far away, though never far enough, Daenerys rode with what remained of her Khalasar. Where once 50,000 riders had thundered at her side, scarcely 8,000 remained, and many of those followed only because their Khan warred more with fear than loyalty. Drogo's blood riders were dust now, folded into the red waste, their banners gnawed to threads by wind. But Regal and Viserion were very much alive. With each passing day she felt their growing weight against the tether of her mind, sensed the throb of furnace hearts pumping hotter, heavier blood. They were longer than wagons now, their wings broad enough to eclipse 2 Dothraki racers galloping abreast. And in the shadows beneath those wings, men whispered that the dragons drank sorrow like mother's milk and grew faster on it than meat or marrow. They left Drogon's corpse where it fell, but Daenerys did not leave without tribute. In the dead of night, while Robert's army still scrambled to extinguish pockets of green flame sputtering among the corpses, Jorah Mormont led a dozen of her bravest across the field. No torches. They navigated by dragonlight alone, the sickly luminescence still pulsing inside exposed veins and cavities. From Drogon's breast they carved a single scale, broad as a Targ shield and black as the night between stars. Its edges were honed by birth adamantine. They tied it to the rump of a sand-stung camel and rode hard before dawn, arrowing south for the Cinnamon Straits. At first light, the Coggin of what remained of her riders presented the scale with bowed head. Daenerys pressed its underside, felt faint warmth yet lingering in the dense ridges, and swore in Valyrian that flame might sleep but never die. She named the relic heart scale and ordered it bound with silver rings that she might wear it across her back like a cloak clasp. It was far too heavy for any ordinary woman. But she was no ordinary woman now, and when, 2 nights later, she first bore its weight, she felt Drogon's ghost settle between her shoulder blades, sorrow transmuted to armor. Robert's council convened in the ragged nave of an ancient temple whose roof had collapsed centuries ago. When the wind shifted, gritty arcs of starlight spilled through the broken vault and painted every helmed head with cold silver. Ser Barristan Selmy stood to the king's right, Lord Eddard Stark to his left. Behind them lounged Ser Jaime Lannister, plucking dragon glass splinters from a rent in his pauldron while humming some bawdy tavern ballad just below hearing. Renly Baratheon, face taut from sunburn and worry, paced the nave in restless loops, emerald cloak flapping like a wounded finch. Robert braced both fists on a cracked altar. 2 dragons remain, he rumbled. And every step we take bleeds us heavier than a butcher's block. We cannot chase the bitch across every Hell's Cape Essos coughs up. We must draw her out. Ned Stark's voice was raw gravel. She will not answer parley, nor stand siege. With 2 wings left, she can strike anywhere. Then we pin her. Robert slammed a gauntlet, sending a puff of powdered marble. Karth Court's marvels. The merchants will throw open their gates if she arrives unhindered. But if we reach them first, if we promise them the second dragon skull. Jaime barked a laugh. And how do we persuade the 13 while our banners drip with ash and horse droppings? They love profit, true, but fear loves them more. Regal roasting their spice towers would ruin a lifetime of ledgers. So we show them a greater ruin, Robert said. The skull goes on ahead. Paxter Redwine's cousin will sail it down the Skahazaden. Let every city between here and the Jade Sea see what befell the Black. When that jawbone grins at their docks, they'll know fire can die. Renly paused mid-stride. And while our trophy drifts toward their harbors, what do? Stalk after on foot like beggars at a mummer's feast. We ride southeast, hugging the coast, Robert decided. Fresh water, fish, villages fat with grain. We'll outrun the Dragon Queen yet. If not, we make her follow us into the fertile Sangazer. Green land burns bright. Smoke will betray her. No one argued. Men were too weary for argument. Outside, the night moaned through broken colonnades, carrying the low, distant ululation of Viserion announcing his hunger. It ended in a note that was almost a question, almost a dirge, and for an instant every man in the temple felt smaller than a mote of ash. Weeks blurred, measured in thirst and wounds and the stink of salted meat. Robert's host kept the Jade Sea on their left, azure water winking each noon like shattered glass. To their right sprawled the Sangazer, a patchwork of emerald rice paddies and lavender reed beds quarried by countless irrigation ditches first cut when Valyria yet stood. Villages huddled atop earthen mounds above floodline. Tiny kingdoms unto themselves, ringed by mud brick walls painted with faded drakes or river leviathans. Some surrendered bread and onion willingly at the sight of Baratheon banners. Others barred gates until Jaime's outriders broke doors and forced tribute in rough casks. Word of the Black Skull's voyage preceded them. In river markets, Robert's heralds nailed proclamations on teak poles. The dragon is mortal. Let the 7 kingdoms and the free cities bear witness. A dozen languages scratched beneath echoed the boast. Caravans carried the tale faster still. Soon every wine sink from laser to ET buzzed with rumor of a foreign stag king who slew winged death, then hitched its bones to his war cart like a prize bear. Daenerys heard the tales on the 12th evening after they entered the tall grass sea. Her Khalasar stumbled upon a trio of wandering priestesses of the Moonsingers, their white robes spattered with blue dye and sweat. The holy women spoke of a ship bearing a black terror with fangs longer than scythe blades, and how sailors wept salt tears upon the deck at the horror yet whispered prayers that the king might spare them next. The youngest priestess repeated the news thrice, voice trembling. The dragon is mortal, the dragon is mortal, the dragon is mortal. Daenerys listened until the words struck her like daggers. After the priestesses departed, she walked alone beyond the firelight and knelt with her hands upon the baking sand. Above, Regal wheeled on silent wings, keeping guard. Viserion slept by the cook fires, belly rising like a glowing forge. The babe mewled in her arms. Dany pressed her lips to the child's fine silver hair and promised him vengeance enough to drown out the lies. Yora found her thus. "There is talk," he said gently, "that the warlocks of Karth would offer sanctuary for a price. Their palace is deep and cool, and their coffers." She touched Heartscale at her back. "I will give them something beyond gold." When she rose, her eyes were the silver of a frozen river at dusk. "Send riders. Let the pureborn of Karth know the mother of dragons comes. And if they doubt us, remind them how loud a hatchling can scream when its brother is slain." That night she dined only on fire. She stepped into the flames of the cook pit with the babe cradled in her arms and called Regal and Viserion down beside her. The Dothraki fled, wailing that fire demons danced. Yora thought his heart would burst, but when dawn crept across the horizon, Daenerys still stood amid the hissing embers, smoke wreathing her unclothed form like gauze. Her skin was unmarked, though her hair blazed white gold beneath soot. The babe gurgled laughter. Regal and Viserion coiled around mother and child, steaming tongues flickering, and where they touched ash turned glass. Word of that miracle sprinted even faster than fear of Robert's skull. In every caravanserai from Mantaries to Meereen, stories collided until no one could sort dread from prophecy. All any trader knew was that east and west thundered toward Karth like black clouds fat with lightning. In the Westeros Robert left behind, storms brewed of darker sort. Cersei Lannister sat the Iron Throne in his absence, but it was a throne cast of nettles. Each hour brought new rumors from the Crownlands. Roving sellswords pillaging hinterlands for coin to cross the sea. Tyrell agents commandeering grain barges meant for King's Landing. A band of faith militant zealots marching north chanting that dragons were Seven's wrath for Robert's sins. Ser Janos Slint had 500 gold cloaks patrolling Flea Bottom day and night, yet still riots flared like grease fires whenever bread ran short. And worse, in the second moon of Robert's campaign, Stannis Baratheon sailed from Dragonstone with the royal fleet, ostensibly to reinforce his brother. Instead, he dropped anchor off Storm's End and declared himself Lord Protector, citing a prophecy scrawled by maesters that the realm perishes when no true Baratheon guards its heart. Word traveled across the narrow sea swift as gulls. Jaime mocked the tidings aloud over supper, but Ned Stark merely grew quieter. Afterward, he summoned Renly to a private council beneath a tattered pavilion. "Stannis moves against your brother," Ned warned. "If Robert remains in Essos, he returns to broken oaths and hungry lords." Renly tugged the gold rose clasp at his throat. "Stannis cannot claim what Robert holds. My brother yet breathes, and the realm reveres a victor, especially one who rides home boasting a dragon's skull." "Victories wane," Ned replied, "and skulls cannot govern. Only a crown can, and crowns are fragile when brothers covet them." Renly's gaze slid toward the distant king's tent, its walls glowing molten in firelight. "Speak plainly, Stark. Would you have me plead Robert's return? I would have the realm intact." Later that night, Renly penned a raven to Highgarden. More grain, more coin, ships enough to cow Stannis. But somewhere between quill and wax, he signed not as Lord of Storm's End but as Lord Paramount of the Reach. An error, perhaps, or a portent. When the raven beat west, it flew with two truths in its breast. The king hunts dragons, the kingdom hunts itself. Robert sensed none of it. His obsession swallowed horizon after horizon, swallowing men with it. Disease bloomed where marsh gnats bit. 2 companies of Crownlanders succumbed to a sweating sickness that left skin yellow as candle wax. Robert burnt their tents to halt the plague. Losing precious canvas meant to shade marching columns. No one complained. Those who still lived were too grateful or too broken. At sunset on the 8th week of the Sangazer March, the green dragon struck. The attack came silent, sudden. One moment a salt breeze fluttered the pennants. Next a gale of wing beats slammed through camp. Viserion stooped from a cloud bank as dusk bled purple into copper. His flame was a white lance tipped blue, hot as smelted star iron. It punched through a ring of Tyrell tents and drew molten furrows through armor before any horn could sound. Robert threw himself atop a Stormlander groom, rolled clear as the blast liquefied a pile of spears. He rose coughing blood-tinged smoke. Viserion clawed past overhead, banking to shred the king's pavilion with his tail spikes. The canvas erupted. Wildfire jars stacked for siege burst in emerald pillars, spraying shards that whistled like angry bees. Archers rallied, loosing. 100 shafts hissed, most useless, some lucky. 2 struck the dragon's tail, 1 wedged under the jaw hinge. Viserion howled but climbed higher. In passing, he loosed a last furnace sneeze over the corpse sled. Drogon's skull ignited like dry tinder. Elsewhere, green fire devoured flesh in sputtering fits, but here the bone refused yield. The flame raced across the monumental brow as if desperate to find purchase, then guttered out, leaving the iron-bound sledge glowing cherry but the skull whole, enamel glistening under starlight. Robert stared up through drifting ash. Regal arrived moments later, circling once only. The 2 dragons vanished eastward together, trailing sparks like comets. The king tasted copper, realized his nose bled from the shock wave. He wiped it across a singed sleeve and grinned, teeth crimson. "Next time," he whispered. "Next time you come lower." That next time would be Karth. It rose from the desert like a fever dream. 30-foot ramparts of fused shellstone, gates inlaid with jade and opal, towers capped in lapis domes that shimmered like dragonfly wings. Beyond the walls, a riot of silk tents sprawled. Pilgrims, peddlers, and preachers awaiting the miracles promised by rumor. The 13 had tripled the city guard, yet still the crush at each gate spilled into dunes. When Robert's scouts first sighted the city's southern watchtower, 3 merchant galleys lay at anchor off the Cinnamon coast, their sails depicting a stag's skull ringed by flames. The Black Skull had arrived. Robert ordered the sledge placed outside the western gate of sand as both trophy and threat. The Carthene called that gate the Vazorn, the Twilight Mouth. Within hours, its archway teemed with citizens gazing in horrified wonder. Torchlight stabbed between the skull's fangs, painting the sand queer shades of emerald. Ambassadors came at dusk. Zaro Zoan Daxos, draped in rainbow silks. Pono the Waterbearer, face hidden behind a lattice veil dripping pearls. A third whose name Robert never caught, for he spent the parley staring at the king's hammer as if it might rise and speak. They offered water, shade, and tribute measured in lapis beads. If only the Westerosi camp would remain beyond the walls. Robert refused the beads. "I will have the Dragon Queen or I will have your heads," he said, loud enough that the interpreter paled. "Erect pavilions within your plaza of bones. Make room for my host." Zaro spread perfumed hands. "Karth is a city of wonder, not war. We keep no armies inside, only the pureborn's honor guard. Your siege engines terrify our small folk." "Then teach them courage," Robert replied, and dismissed the envoys. Secretly, though, he knew his gamble lay brittle as glass. If Daenerys approached by air, scorpions on ram, parts could pin her dragons, but only if Karth allowed his men through the gates. Daenerys did not approach by air. At dawn on the 9th day of Robert's standoff, columns of dust appeared along the Cinnamon Road. The first outriders bore no banners, only spears tipped with bronze crescents. Behind them rode a ragged yet terrible host. Dothraki screamers, Carthene sellswords armored in lacquered lamellar, 3 companies of Nathi archers whose faces were masked in butterfly dye, and at their center, unmistakable even at a league, 2 dragons paced, wings tucked, tails coiling like white-hot cables. Robert rode out with Barristan, Ned, and Jaime, flanked by 300 knights in staggered files. The air smelled of cinnamon and fear. When the king reined atop a dune ridge, the opposing host did the same not 100 yards distant. Daenerys advanced alone. She wore a breastplate hammered of beaten copper and scaled with small overlapping drafts of black glass. Shards chipped from Drogon's ribs, Ned Stark guessed. Heart scale arced across her shoulders like a cloak. At her hip hung not a sword but a whip of braided dragon sinew capped with a steel lash. She held her infant against her heart, swaddled in linen the color of setting suns. 10 steps behind her padded regal, Viserion glided overhead, casting a shadow broad enough to enclose both hosts in one fluttering heartbeat. Daenerys paused at the midpoint between armies and called out in the common tongue. Her voice carried clean across the sand, though no one later agreed on whether she spoke softly or like thunder. They only agreed all heard her, from the lowliest groom to Robert Baratheon himself. "King," she hailed, "you hunted one of my sons. I have come to end the hunt." Robert nudged his destrier forward 1 pace. The horse shivered but obeyed. "Lay down fire and I will lay down steel. Surrender the beasts. I will surrender nothing but judgment." Her silver-gold hair whipped across her cheeks. "Yet dragons hunger. Let them feast on fate. A duel, king against queen. Win, and the children are yours, living or dead as you decide. Lose, and the skull you dragged across half a world joins its brother beneath my sky." A ripple of unease flowed through the nights. Robert's laughter cracked it. "A duel?" he boomed. "With what weapons?" "Truth," she said, "and fire if truth fails." Ned saw Robert's grip tighten on the hammer haft. He felt suddenly that air had fled the world. Beneath his breastplate, his heart beat as if trying to dig free. Robert spat. "I fought Rhaegar beside a river of blood. I will fight his Get beside the sea of dust. But we duel on earth, woman, not the sky. Your dragons stay chained. They will watch." Her eyes flicked to the sand behind Robert. A whisper of wind, a hiss. The ground parted. Jorah Mormont emerged, carrying a coffer of beaten bronze. He set it down, opened the lid, and withdrew a sword. Valyrian steel shimmered, red and black ripples beneath the dawn. The blade had no name Robert knew, yet it sang in the air like a promise of old wrongs righted. Jorah knelt, offering hilt first. Daenerys closed slender fingers around the grip. Flames shot along the fuller, not burning but pulsing. "No chains," she corrected. "Only witnesses." Robert dismounted. Barristan stirred, but one glance froze him. The king unstrapped his hammer and tossed it to Jaime. "Guard it," Robert commanded. "Should I fall, nail her dragons with it." Jaime bowed flamboyantly. "I shall try not to dent your pretty girl killer." Ned stepped forward. "You need not do this, Robert. I need not breathe either, yet I do." He strode down the slope, boots sending miniature avalanches of sand. He drew a long steel bastard sword from his back scabbard. It looked crude beside the Valyrian flame, a field axe beside a mirror. No matter. Steel knew Robert, and Robert knew killing. They faced each other on level ground. The infant cooed once. Wind teased banners high overhead. Even the dragons stilled, as if the world itself inhaled and held breath. Daenerys advanced first, sword low. Robert matched her stride. He swung a probing cut she parried with a shower of sparks. Valyrian steel bit half through the bastard sword's edge. Robert grunted approval, twisted, slammed his pommel for her temple. She rolled under, pivoted, slashed for his unarmored calf. He leapt one-footed, blade clanging against copper greaves. Dust swirled. They exchanged a dozen blows, each tested and found wanting. On the 13th, literal fire spat from her sword as metal kissed metal. A gout of amber flame washed over Robert's left pauldron. Leather blackened, but the flesh beneath did not scorch. Sweat steamed instead of skin. "You bleed?" she taunted. "Not yet." He feinted high, brought the blade low. Valyrian steel caught his swing, but he put shoulder into it, driving her back 2 steps. Her heels sank, slowing. Robert pressed, battering. The 3rd tempest strike cracked open her breastplate at the seam. The 4th snapped his sword an inch below the guard. Metal shards rang. Daenerys pivoted to thrust through his exposed flank. Yet Robert hurled the broken hilt like a dagger. It struck her brow, opening a red crescent. Blood trickled. She hesitated 1 heartbeat. Robert bull rushed, seizing her sword arm at the wrist. Flame seared his gauntlet instantly, but he held, snarling. His other hand clamped about her throat. Rhaegal roared. Viserion screamed, diving. Ned's heart rose into his throat, but Daenerys lifted her free hand, palm outward. The dragons froze mid-wing beat, shrieking rage yet obeying. "Yield," Robert growled, fingers tightening. Smoke spiraled from scorched leather. Her wrist writhed. She met his gaze through sweat and blood. "For Drogon," she whispered, and drove her knee hard up between his legs. Armor saved him from the worst, but pain exploded like hammered iron. His grip loosened enough for her to wrench free. She staggered back, gasping. He doubled yet did not drop. She raised Valyrian steel for 1 final stroke. Too slow. Robert surged, both hands clasped, smashing his burnt gauntlet across her jaw. Something cracked. She spun, collapsing to knees. Her sword point dipped. Robert towered over her, chest heaving. He kicked the blade free. It flew, cartwheeling before embedding in sand a dozen paces off. Daenerys swayed, blinking blood. The infant sobbed. "Mercy," Ned called from the ridge, though whether to one or both, even he did not know. Robert planted boot against Heartscale. His hammer was distant, his sword broken, yet his hands were enough. He flexed blistered fingers, reached for her hair. Daenerys lifted her eyes. They were pools of molten silver like steel at forge heat, tears and fury mingling. She whispered 1 word in Valyrian. No one but Robert heard it. Fire erupted from the wound where Heartscale met her spine. Not ordinary fire. White, silent, pulse-bright. It poured around Robert like water, engulfing him head to toe. His scream ripped across the plain, wordless, infinite. Armor glowed, flesh puckered, hair flashed to vapor, yet the fire did not burn him to ash. Instead it etched shapes upon his skin. Swirling runes older than old Valyria, older than speech. They glimmered gold, then sank inside, leaving flesh reborn scarless. When the light vanished, Robert still stood, armor molten to black glass. Steam curled from his beard, intact. He stared at his hands, turning them. Daenerys pushed upright. She too unburnt. No wind stirred. Even the babe quieted. A hush blanketed all creation. Robert whispered, "What sorcery? Dragon fire burns truth," she said hoarsely. "It shows what is beneath." She touched her broken jaw, already the bone knit. "Will you kill me now, knowing your steel cannot lie to fire?" He looked from his unmarred palms to her eyes. Something inside him shifted, tectonic. He took 1 step back, then another. Behind him, Barristan started forward, thinking the king mortally wounded. Robert raised a hand. "Halt." "Queen," he said, voice rough, "I have hunted since youth, yet never have I found my prey hunts me in turn." He glanced skyward. Viserion and Rhaegal waited, talons flexing. Slowly, Robert sank to 1 knee. Ned Stark felt the world tilt. Robert bowed his head. "I have spilled innocent blood in the name of a war dead and done. I sought to kill ghosts, but ghosts cannot die. What stands before me is life." Daenerys swayed where she stood. Blood dripped from her split lip onto the babe's brow. She tasted iron and smoke and a strange new hope. "Call off your men," she said. Robert rose. He turned to his host, voice booming. "Stand down." Swords sheathed, spears dipped. It was that simple. He faced her once more. No terms here, only an end. He glanced at Heartscale, then at the infant. "Name him." "Visenya," she sighed. "A daughter." Robert's beard twitched upward. Heartbreak or humor, impossible to tell. "Then may she fear no iron." He turned, began the long walk up the dune. No escort followed, he was alone and yet not. Atop the ridge, Ned watched his friend approach, face unreadable. Every knight sank to one knee as the king passed. Robert did not seem to notice. Daenerys knelt beside her daughter, whispered soft in her ear. Regal exhaled a plume that curled around them like a shield. Somewhere, high above, a gull cried over the Cinnamon Coast, oblivious to the calamity it ignored. The morning sun climbed and found two armies facing one another across a scarred plain. Neither advanced. Between them, the Valyrian blade still quivered in the sand, point buried deep, its ripples catching light, blood and fire dancing along the steel as if reluctant to choose which memory to keep. The story did not end. Stories never end, only pause where hearts cannot bear more beating. The dragons waited, the stag considered, the wolf watched, and the kingdoms across the sea held breath. For peace stood balanced on an edge finer than any sword. The moment before a girl queen and a battered king decided whether the next word spoken would be war or wonder, and whether history would remember this day as the last hunt or the first mercy. The hush that followed the duel clung to the Cinnamon Road like a living thing, a breathless creature unwilling to stir the grains of sand lest they shatter the fragile stillness. When Robert reached the crest of the dune, he paused, looming dark against the sun-bleached sky, and though his host thronged behind him, knights, archers, and spearmen stretching in uneasy files, still he felt suddenly, profoundly alone. Ned Stark's shadow merged with his own as the Lord of Winterfell matched his step. The two men stood side by side, weather-worn statues gazing down on armies that did not dare to move. Below, Daenerys Targaryen cradled her child in the crook of her elbow, half kneeling on the hot sand. A rivulet of blood slipped along her jaw and dropped, silent, onto the linen wrappings at the babe's chest. She wiped the thread away with her thumb. Regal's basilisk eyes flicked from the king on the ridge to the queen at his feet, useless wings mantled in suspicion. Above, Viserion drifted on a thermal, keening a note so low it seemed carved from the earth itself.
No van erster.
The breeze had wholly fled. Even the noon sun seemed reluctant to glare at the scene, dimming behind a high veil of dust that diffused the light into a sickly amber haze. Robert tasted iron on the back of his tongue, the ghost of dragon flame, acrid and sharp. His voice cracked when he finally spoke. "Lord Stark," he said, "have the maesters bring water." Ned inclined his head. "At once." He gestured, and Ser Davos Seaworth, leading the contingent of field healers, hurried downhill with two lantern-jawed Stormlander squires bearing buckets sloshing with scented water. The squire who carried the copper ladle trembled so violently that droplets flashed from the rim and hissed away on the sun-scoured sand. Yet he never spilled a drop. Daenerys's bloodied lip twitched when she saw them approach. She shifted, instinctively shielding her infant in the crook of her arm. Regal curled around her, tail sweeping a shallow arc that sent dust pluming toward the maesters, warning enough. Still they advanced, slow, palms open. Every eye on the field watched that cautious approach, some with hope, many with dread, for none knew whether peace or carnage perched upon the razor of the next heartbeat. A single cough burst from somewhere among the Carthene cell's words, ragged, perhaps born of dust, and that slight noise jolted the air, breaking the spell. Spears rattled. A row of Reach longbowmen instinctively renotched arrows, drawing a sharp bark from Ser Garland Tyrell at their flank. "Hold!" he called, sword raised. "Hold! Damn you!" Robert closed his eyes, drew in a long breath that burned, and exhaled slow, steady. When he opened them, Ned was already descending, cloak billowing, his stride neither quick nor tentative. Calm, Ned had always radiated calm where Robert belched storm. In that moment, the king felt a pang of something like envy, mingled with ancient affection. He tightened the frayed leather strap at his wrist and followed. Each pace downward grew heavier, as if the sand wished to swallow his boots and fix him on the ridge forever. He forced his legs to move. At the halfway point, a flicker of motion caught his eye. Jaime Lannister stepping to the dune crown, hammer across his shoulder, golden hair ablaze with sun. The lion's face was unreadable, lips a narrow line. Robert dipped his chin, and Jaime answered with an almost imperceptible nod. A warrior acknowledging another's right to walk unarmed into danger. When Robert at last reached the flat, he found Ned kneeling before the Dragon Queen, offering a simple strip of white linen. No maesters yet. Rhaegal had blocked their approach entirely, head low, teeth like wet-forged scimitars bared in warning. Ned had solved the problem the northern way. Alone, unthreatening, no weapons drawn, only cloth in hand. Daenerys regarded him warily, then accepted the linen. She dabbed her split lip, wincing when the cloth snagged. The babe stirred and mewled. Instantly Rhaegal's growl deepened, but Daenerys hushed them both with a murmur in liquid Valyrian that rolled like distant thunder across still water. Robert stopped 3 paces off, heat pounding in his ears. For a long span, no one spoke. Eventually, Daenerys pushed dark-soaked strands of hair from her eyes and ventured, in a voice that trembled only at the edges. "Will you honor what you spoke on the field, your grace? Will your men stand down?" "My word was given," Robert said. The rasp in his throat chafed. "And my word binds them." A faint tremor of relief shivered through the lines of her shoulders, visible only to one who had seen men brace under fear. She bowed her head toward Ned. "And yours, Lord Stark?" "You have it," Ned answered. Rhaegal's neck uncoiled another foot, nostrils flaring, tasting Stark's scent. Ice, pine, hearth smoke too faint to truly linger in this blasted heat. But Ned did not flinch. He merely met the dragon's molten gaze with steady gray eyes, and after a moment the green beast snorted, an almost dismissive puff that silvered the ends of Ned's beard with ash. Robert's gaze drifted to Heartscale still strapped across Daenerys's back. The shard's black glass glimmered, singing a silent song of loss. His scarred palm twitched. He looked away, unwilling to feel what threatened to well. "Water!" he croaked and nodded behind him. On cue, the squires eased forward, legs shaking. Daenerys lifted a hand to stay Rhaegal, then accepted the ladle. She drank, offered Ned, then Robert. When he raised the copper to his mouth, the liquid smelled faintly of crushed mint. It slid cool over his tongue, sweet relief. He poured the residue onto the sand, a libation to burnt dead who could no longer drink, and closed his eyes a moment. When he opened them, he saw the babe staring up at him. Eyes wide, impossibly violet, irises so deep they seemed bottomless wells. In that instant, the world fell silent again. The armies blurred, and Robert remembered Lyanna as she had been in the winter garden at Storm's End, laughing as snowflakes melted on black hair. The memory struck like an arrow. He felt his throat close, stiffened, forced the ghost behind a towering wall. This child was not his dead love, not even her kin, but still something fragile and fiercely alive peered from those eyes. Something that pleaded, "Do not ruin the world with my blood." He cleared his throat. "She is healthy? Strong as dawn," Daenerys answered, voice iron. "And she will never know chains." Robert inclined his head. "Then let us forge none, for her or for ours. Peace. A hard peace, but peace." Daenerys rose slowly, the infant cradled. She still held Valyrian steel in her sword hand. She angled the blade, point down, and set it tip first into the sand between them. Robert watched, waiting, pulse hammering. She released the hilt, stood upright, trembling faintly. Overhead, Viserion shrieked, banking low. Every Westerosi bow jerked taut. Robert threw up a hand. "Hold!" Feathers of white flame dripped from Viserion's jaws as he passed, but he did not attack. Instead, he landed with a thunderous buffet of wings behind Daenerys, curling protectively round queen and daughter. The message was clear. There would be no treachery, but likewise no one approached unbidden. Daenerys folded her blood-stained linen, eyes never leaving Robert. Then we must speak of terms, Robert Baratheon. Terms written in truths, not the lies that stoked this war. Truths, he echoed. The word tasted unfamiliar. He glanced over his shoulder. On the southern flank he saw stag banners drooping, men swaying with exhaustion. On the northern ridge, Tyrell roses fluttered against the sky. Between ranks lay scorched debris, half-buried bones. Truth, indeed. He turned back. We will speak, but first the wounded. Let our healers mix. Yours may tend ours tend yours. No blades. We bury dead together. Daenerys considered, then nodded. Agreed. She raised a palm. Jorah Mormont emerged from the Sellsword line with 2 Carthene physicians in trailing pearl-white robes. Behind them a train of Nathi archers slung bows and slithered through the ranks bearing clay jars of butterfly salve. On the Westerosi side, Grand Maester Pycelle trundled forth, wobbling under the weight of a bulging satchel of tinctures, flanked by Septimoel and 2 novice brothers of the faith. The watchers on both sides stirred, murmured, parted. Healers crossed no man's land, and no spear sought their blood. Something unseen unclenched. Camp sprawled in a vast semicircle north of Carthage's sand-bleached walls, half civilized and half chaos. As dusk bled bronze across the skyline, fires dotted the plain, each ringed by mixed circles of men once enemies. Laughter, thin, brittle but laughter, rose where Tyrell men traded arbor gold for stories from Dothraki outriders who spoke, through gestures and smatterings of bastard Valyrian, of the night the moon cracked and poured dragons into the sky. Stormlander smiths compared the hardness of copperscale fragments to steel rivets with Carthene artisans, while the Nathi moved ghost-like among the wounded, anointing burns with fragrant salves. Everywhere, the low, thrumming purr of regal and Viserion climbing thermals kept men mindful of their place. Within the largest pavilion, a hastily joined edifice of Stormlander canvas and Carthene silk, Robert met with Daenerys, Ned, Barristan, Jorah, and Xaro Zoan Daxos, the merchant prince whose rainbow W. Cloak could have financed a small city. 2 tables formed a crude map of the known world, drawn in spilled wine and rearranged plates. A platter of pomegranates for Westeros, a bowl of saffron rice appended for Valyria's smoking ruins, thin dagger blades marking the jade coastlines of Et. Your Grace, Xaro purred, addressing Robert with all the suavity of a man rearranging a game board. Karth abhors war within its walls, yet profit is a more gracious guest. Permit me to broker safe lodging for your host in the caravan city. Markets will thrive, tongues will wag, and wounds, perhaps, shall mend. Robert eyed him. And Kartha's tariff? Merely a dragon, Xaro said, smiling wide. Jorah snorted. You'll not have one scale, merchant. Daenerys lifted a hand. Enough. Xaro, my friend, your coffers overflow. You shall have exclusive rights to trade in Valyrian relics we uncover east of the Bone Mountains, if you ensure grain flows to both camps. The merchant prince placed a theatrical hand over his heart. Ah, Khaleesi, you wound me with generosity. He turned his smile to Robert. A bargain forged by fire and need. Robert grunted his assent. He had little taste for parley with silk-robed panderers, but his men hungered, and the Stormland's treasury bled coppers as fast as men bled life. If grain stilled unrest, he would swallow pride. Barristan cleared his throat. My king, we must discuss succession. Stannis's intentions darken. Ravens report he's landed at Old Town. The Hightowers close their gates. Robert rubbed the bridge of his nose. Let him sport banners on the honey wine. The realm still answers my seal, so long as this war ends. And if it does not? Jorah asked quietly. No one answered. Night deepened. Outside the pavilion, Regal crouched atop the corpse sled, great talons curling around Drogon's eyeless sockets, breath pluming in slow pulses that color shifted from emerald to indigo. The dragon's gaze followed 2 shapes slipping between fire shadows. Arya, Lady Sansa's northern handmaid disguised as a page, wandering the foreign camp with a Sellsword girl no older than 14. They lingered too near, gaping at scales as if at fair curios, until one hiss from Regal sent them scurrying. The beast lowered his head, nostrils gusting, and closed its single good eye. A low rumble like distant thunder vibrated through bone and wood. Inside, negotiations ground on. Daenerys demanded recognition of her daughter as legitimate princess of Dragonstone, rightful heir of the Targaryen line. Robert balked. Ned brokered. The child might bear the title Lady of Dragonstone, lands withheld until she came of age. Daenerys countered. The babe must be styled Princess of Assyria, a new realm to be carved along the Shadowlands. Xaro drooled at trade possibilities. Barristan sighed. Hours later, a tentative shape of concord emerged. Robert would escort his host west by sea. Dragons would remain east of the Narrow Sea for 10 years, Karth pledging guardianship. In return, Robert pledged non-aggression, and Daenerys pledged to send 3 shiploads of dragon glass yearly to Storm's End for forging arms against the White Walkers stirring in northern legends. The notion of those icy specters drew snorts from Yora, but Ned's face remained grave. He alone knew the silence of the wall's shadow. Robert, weary, leaned back, eyes rimmed red. 10 years, he mused. 10 years for dragons to double thrice. He eyed Daenerys under heavy brows. Will you truly stay east? She met the gaze unflinching. I will stay so long as the daughters of war are fed. Let us mend lands before we claim thrones. Robert studied her, and in the flicker of torchlight saw not the child bride sold to a horse lord, but a woman walled in by purpose as iron rings a spear butt. He felt something in his chest loosen, a rusted hinge creaking open. Then let it be written, he said. Xaro clapped, rings chiming. Yora dipped quill to parchment, scratching the pact of the cinnamon plain. 3 nights later, moonlight drenched the camp's silver. Robert stood beyond the fires alone, watching waves lap black shore. A figure approached. Jaime Lannister, hammer hefted in one hand, the Valyrian blade Daenerys had surrendered in the other. Your Grace, Jaime said lightly, yet his tone carried weight. I thought you'd want this. Robert accepted the sword, surprised by its balance. Liquid quick even in scarred mitts. Fine edge, he murmured. What name? None I heard, Jaime replied. He gazed out at the water, sighing. A pity. Every Valyrian blade deserves a song, yet so many lie nameless. Perhaps, Robert tested a cut, air whispering. It may never sing again. I've no thirst for more blood. Jaime's brows lifted. King Robert without thirst? Westeros will quake. He paused. Stannis marches. Renly schemes. The realm may yet thirst for you. Robert turned the blade so starlight rippled. The realm will live, he said softly, so long as dragons and stags speak, not roar. Jaime tilted his head, studying. You almost sound like a king, Robert snorted. Perhaps I'm growing old. He planted the blade upright in sand beside him and stared at gulls swooping faint shapes across the night horizon. Tell me, Kingslayer, do you believe fire can forgive? Jaime folded arms. The question seemed to strike somewhere deep, behind his practiced smirk. He opened his mouth, closed it, shrugged. If it can, my lord, we've never given it much chance. Robert barked a laugh. Truth. He looked east, where 2 dim stars moved across the sky, dragons drifting on the Gulf heat. Their silhouettes shimmered against the half-moon, graceful, terrible, free. I named it a hunt, Robert said, but perhaps I was the hunted quarry all along. Jaime glanced sidelong. Enjoying the chase? Robert did not answer. He turned, hefting the Valyrian steel with both palms. Felt warm. In its mirrored ripples he saw not his bearded face but flickers of the duel under the noonday blaze. Saw Daenerys' eyes and the moment white fire carved runes upon his flesh. Runes he now traced in sleepless night, patterns unseen yet felt, pulsing faint beneath skin. He shivered. The night was warm, yet he shivered. In the Carthene quarter of camp, Daenerys sat at a round, low table draped in midnight silk. Her daughter slept in a cradle fashioned from a hollowed salted log, cushioned with lambswool. Yora leaned against the tent's central pole, arms crossed, gaze fixed on the babe as if half expecting her to sprout scales. "She looks like her brother," Yora said finally. "Rhaego." Daenerys' hand stilled on a parchment scroll. "She will outlive him." Yora nodded. "The pact buys time, yet time feeds ambition too. Robert may keep his word, but lords, kings, liars shift with wind." Daenerys touched Heartscale upon her back. She had not removed it since the duel. "So let wind meet fire. I do not fear." Across the tent, Varys emerged from behind a hanging drape with the silence of mist. The eunuch's robes changed hue according to the lantern's flicker, now amethyst, now coal. He bowed slightly. "Khaleesi, news flows as rivers. Stannis seeks crown of Westeros. Cersei forges alliances with Highgarden. And in the shadows of Astapor, slavers whisper of dragon eggs newly unearthed. Men will sell mothers for false scales alone. For true, they will sell kingdoms." Daenerys eyed him. "And you, spider, what do you sell?" "Balance," Varys said. He produced a sealed scroll. "A raven from Braavos. The Iron Bank invites audience. They smell change as bankers smell coin." Daenerys broke the seal. Words danced. Offers of loans, of fleets, of influence. She folded the parchment, thoughtful. "Coin waits war," she murmured. "It buys peace too," Varys countered. "Depends who counts." Daenerys rose, circled the cradle, brushing the back of her finger across the babe's cheek. "I will count for her." Outside, Rhaegal roared to the moon and Viserion answered from the upper currents, their duet echoing over slumbering camps. Some men dreamed of home, others dreamed of flames. Few slept sound. Next dawn, Robert convened his inner circle on the seaward bluff beside Cartha's western docks. Tidewash rolled below, gulls screaming. Barristan produced a scrap of parchment modeled from salt spray. Stannis' latest declaration, naming himself king by right of blood and by the will of a red god worshipped in Dragonstone's smoky halls. The seal of the Lord of Light burned crimson wax. "Madness," Robert muttered. "Brother or not, I'll not have north and south sundered by another false faith." Renly, cloak snapping emerald, smirked. "Brothers make the bitterest wine when left to ferment too long." Robert thrust the parchment at him. "You'll ride for Old Town, Parley. Remind Stannis that blood, though thinned by pride, flows thicker than red god's wine. If he will not bend the knee, we will cross steel." Renly bowed, though the tilt carried a hint of flourish. "Your wish, and our cousin Tyrell's good will stands ready, if the crown chooses its allies wisely." Robert growled. "Enough riddles. Say what you mean." Renly's green eyes glinted. "Highgarden would be eased to no dragons roost far away. A marriage, perhaps? Your daughter to Loras's nephew? Alliances tame rumor." Robert opened his mouth, but Ned spoke first. "There will be time to weigh marriages once peace takes root. For now, let us tend present fires." He turned to Robert. "We should dispatch ravens across the realm. News of the pact, proof of dragons' restraint. Fear thrives on silence." Robert nodded. "Write them, sign my hand, tell the realm the war ends." And with that decree, a tide invisible began to shift westward, carrying words like driftwood. The king and dragon queen have sworn a decade of peace. Some hailed, some cursed, but all listened. Yet peace is a vine planted in stony soil, and no one knew whether its roots would find purchase. 3 weeks into the truce, a Stormlander patrol vanished north of Karth. Tracks ended in scorched grass. No bodies recovered. Rumor blamed Dothraki raiders disgruntled at Daenerys' restraint. Robert fumed but held his host in check. In the 4th week, Kartha's pureborn council demanded Robert's catapults removed from sight of their ivory towers. Jaime scoffed. Robert ordered the engines dismantled for parts, spears reforged into plowshares. Blacksmiths grumbled, but the work offered coin and purpose. On the 42nd day, a fleet of Tyroshi galleys arrived bearing envoys of the Archon. They offered gold if Robert would escort dragons north to break Volantene power on the Rhoyne. Robert refused. The envoys sneered, sailed on. And through all these flickers of tension, dragons circled overhead, twin suns blazing at dawn, twin comets at dusk. Each day Rhaegal's wings cast broader shadows. Each night Viserions' roars deepened, vibrating within bones. Men who once fed on awe began to feed on dread again. How long before peace shatters beneath those wings? Robert wrestled the same fear in private. One twilight, as he stood beneath Drogon's skull sketching fresh runes that surfaced occasional on his skin, faint gold lines visible only in certain moon angles, Ned approached. "Does it pain you?" Ned asked softly, indicating the runes. Robert regarded the markings. "No pain, but I feel watched, as if fire remembers my blood." Ned clasped a mailed hand on his friend's shoulder. "Fire and ice both remember. It is men who forget." Robert's laugh rumbled low. "A northerner's wisdom." He sobered. "Tell me true, Ned. Will lords accept a pact with dragons?" "Some will see prudence," Ned answered. "Others will crave old glories. But so long as the king upholds honor, hearts may follow." Robert exhaled, heaviness settling. Then honor must temper hammer. On the 60th day, a raven beat weary wings to Daenerys' pavilion. Its message bore the sigil of the Undying of Qarth, an invitation to the House of the Undying, promising visions of futures framed in shade. Yora urged caution. Zaro begged refusal. Varys smiled thinly and whispered that knowledge is a shackle that sometimes restrains fate, sometimes snaps it free. Daenerys resolved to go, but only with her children. Rhaegal and Viserion bristled. Neither cared for labyrinths of spell-soaked stone. Yet they followed. Word reached Robert at midday. Against Barristan's counsel he rode at once, alone save a pair of scouts, to the house's black gates. There he found priests in worm-gray robes, eyes painted blue, chanting oaths to time. They barred entry, but Robert's presence, heavy with runes he barely controlled, made them blanch. He demanded to enter. They refused. He waited, hammer across thighs, until the sun fell and torches guttered. Hours passed. Then the gates yawned. Daenerys stepped forth holding her sleeping babe, skin damp, eyes shining with tears unshed. Rhaegal slunk behind, scales dulled as if coated in ash. Viserion breathed shallow, head low. Robert moved to her side without a word. He saw the tremor in her hands, saw a cut upon her brow reopened. "What vision?" he asked. She shook her head. "1,000, she whispered. 1,000 paths, each ending in fire and one in." She trailed off, eyes distant. Robert waited, but she said no more. He offered his own water skin. She drank, then straightened. Together they led dragon and child back into starlight. Not long after, she summoned him. In private, beneath the canvas hush, she spoke at last. "I saw Westeros drowned beneath winter's wings of corpse white. I saw my daughter groan, fire in her palms, standing beside a man wearing your face yet not your crown. I saw dragons dying again, and dragons reborn." Robert's jaw tightened. Visions twist. Perhaps, but truth hides within them. Her gaze pierced. "I will honor the pact. 10 years. Yet I must prepare for a storm greater than ours. And when winter's shadow reaches even Essos, I will cross again. Whether peace lives or dies by then depends on choices we forge now." Robert felt chill settle. The prophecy of ice demons. Stark tales. Not tale. Memory yet to come. Her fingers brushed heartscale. "Swear, Robert. When the white wind howls, you will call me." He met her vow with his own. "On hammer and heart, I swear." They clasped forearms, stag and dragon, sealing a bond older than titles. The day of departure dawned copper. Robert's fleet, patched and reprovisioned, crowded Carthage harbor like a gaggle of stubborn seabirds. The black skull had been set upon the prow of the stag's fury, mouth gaping to drink spray. Its charred surface reflected sunrise, a warning and a promise both. On the pier Robert embraced Ned. then Barristan, clasped arms with Renly and Garland Tyrell. He approached Daenerys last. Around her swarmed Carthene nobles bearing gifts. Bolts of cloud silk, cages of nightingales with silver beaks. She ignored them, eyes fixed on the king. He bowed not low but genuine. She returned the gesture. Nearby, the babe gurgled, fist batting at empty air. Regal and Viserion circled gaunt towers beyond the docks, twin wardens of a fragile peace. Until winter, Daenerys said. Until fire answers ice, Robert replied. No more words served. He turned, mounted the gangplank. Drums thundered, lines cast off. Canvas caught wind, snapping. The stag's fury slipped seaward, bones of a dragon guiding her like some mythic figurehead. On deck, Robert rested, palms on the rail. Sea salt filled his lungs, cleansing. Behind, the runes glimmered under his collar, unseen, alive. Westward lay brothers, betrayal, the uneasy throne. Eastward, behind him, lay dragons nursing grief and a mother nursing prophecy. Between them, a pact, thin parchment, thick hope, fluttered like a wayward gull in turbulent skies. And so the long peace began, measured not in silence but in the soft drum of waves against hull, in the beating of two great wings that still, despite all, chose to ride warm air rather than shatter it. The world turned on, grinding slow, carrying stories yet unwritten through dusk toward a horizon lined with snow-capped mountains and simmering volcanoes alike, each waiting to test the fragile alloy of oaths sworn beneath cinnamon sky.